Good morning. This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker. Good morning, Mr. Parker. How are you doing this week?
I'm fine, thank you, Wayne. It's been a busy weekend with football matches, and of course, there's a game tonight as well. So that would be a treble.
Busy for one of us. I mean,
Mm.
one of my mates was posting, I saw him say something like it's the first game in 13 days for United, but then there's only another four in the next 47. So
Mm.
that's 5 games in 60 days, which is grim. It's grimmer than losing all the time. At least we've got something to talk about. So you were at Palace this weekend. I know we'll talk about Palace in a bit. How was that? Obviously, the mood around Sellers Park's a bit different at the moment.
It was different yesterday. I mean, after being at West Ham on Saturday, where there's a little bit more of a buzz, and definitely more of a buzz now, more belief that something may happen, even though they had a nil-nil at the weekend. There were still positives that they've stepped forward. But I look at Palace, and I turned up there. And normally I'm at grounds at least 2.5 hours before kickoff, but I kind of was running late, and I got there just about, I'm going to say, just before 12 o'clock, which is late for me. And I'm walking from the station up to the grounds, and I thought I got the kickoff time wrong. I really thought that the kickoff time was later because it was so flat. It was not. It was absolutely amazing how flat that ground was, and went in the press area, and that was quiet. And to be honest, they got going later on in the game when after the sending off, they got going, the fans. But you can still feel that it's lost that buzz, because obviously they went on a massive high in a short space of time,
Yeah,
and someone's just pulled the rug away at this moment, and the manager, which is a shame really, because I like him, didn't help the situation by saying that he's going at the end of the season.
yeah,
Things have been going well at the time. He said it might have been different, but because they all know why he's made that decision, and it's kind of as it inching towards it, it's just a shame, really. And the result helped him yesterday, winning. If anything else, it could have been, not been nice considering how good Palace is, really. But he got a result, and so that helps him for a little while.
yeah. We'll talk about Palace in a little bit, of course. Before we crack on with today's agenda, just a few on this days and things like that to talk about. On this day, Johnny Carey's birthday, famous Manchester United captain. Busby's first great captain and leader. Great story about Johnny Carey when we were, I think it was Busby's first league title. We were on the sort of almost there. We were almost there. We started a game to officially wrap it up, but the game that basically decided it on the days before goal difference, it was goal average. The game which was practically deciding it was against Chelsea, and he got the ball from his fullback position and charged forward and scored from 30 yards. When you think about the old five-man front lines, the fullbacks charging up and scoring from 30 goals, tells you everything about Busby's side. Happy birthday to Casemiro and Tyler Frederickson. On this days, Paddy Crerand made his debut against Blackpool in 1963. On this day in 1974, you'll like this one, Paul. Played Wolves at home. We drew 0-0. We got a penalty. Alex Stepney had been penalty taker that season. He'd been actually United's top scorer with 2 goals. This is goalkeeper Alex Stepney 2 goals, top goal scorer by the Christmas point of the season. We took the penalty. We took the penalty. It was saved by the Wolves keeper. He ran all the way back to the net. Obviously, Stepney was knackered by the time he got there. It was like 30 odd at this point, and he was like, "I'm not taking another one." So that was that. And on this day, 3 years ago, we played Barcelona at home. 1-1. Anthony scored that great goal. Whatever happened to him? Um, okay, so 13 days, Paul, without a game. Not a position you were ever in with United. Usually the opposite. In fact, too many cup games, too many replays. I thought the late goal at West Ham was one of those where I actually thought at the time it's good for momentum. You score a late goal like that, you're not lost. You found a result. You've got it out of the bag there. Um, But really, you've had 13 days without a game, and momentum sort of resets itself, doesn't it? It's like you can't really build on anything that happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, see that, and that's my point, and that's why I'm not a lover of all these people who have been kind of hypnotized to believe that players need rest when in theory you don't. You need the fire stoked up, need it to be slightly burning at least, and you need games just to keep things going. When you go and like you mentioned there, what United went and done there, scoring that late goal, all you want to do after something like that, because there was a buzz, is then to get into the next one, and they haven't had that opportunity. Well, if that opportunity had been there, and then they would maybe have lost, and then the I'm tired brigade would have come out and started having a go at the manager about resting people this and resting people that.
Yeah.
So those players have got to come out again from scratch, off the back of not a great performance, but we talk about more about the end than anything else in that game,
Yeah.
and try and get themselves going in a very, very tough fixture. Regardless of anything, playing Everton at any time is always difficult because it's a big game for them. So it's one that I'm actually looking forward to because again it becomes a little bit of a make or break game for Michael Carrick. He needs something. He wants a performance, and he definitely wants a result. So again, I mean, he's under pressure because he knows he's been still scrutinised by everybody. He's quietened down a bit because there's been no games. But
Yeah.
now it's going to start again now until the next break.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got we'll be talking about Palace in a bit, so there's 2 games in a week to talk about today. But after that, then it's another break for a bit. And the other thing that's in the sort of like melting pot is that Mason Mount and De Ligt are suffering with these injuries. Mason Mount is always said to be like the next game away, and he might well be in the squad tonight. But De Ligt, there's no real time scale on him. I think when Carrick came in, he was saying that he'd hope to have him in the squad like by mid-February, or he was talking about him being in the squad soon anyway, and that's not happened. We know that De Ligt's had his injury problems, and he was having a decent season before he's been absent. And obviously Maguire's coming in, and he's done all right. But everyone's wanting to see what De Ligt and Martinez look like, and obviously at the same time we've got Heaven who stepped in and did a good job. Euro in there who's not had any game time as well. Bit of a concern, isn't it, with De Ligt? The fact that it's said to be a back issue, and we know how difficult back issues can be, especially to even predict sometimes. But the lack of sort of clarity over him, it's concerning. When there isn't any update, it's sort of like, there's something more serious going on there.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. No one's talking about him. I'm sure there's a lot of people asking questions, but no one's saying anything. So you wonder why they're normally quick enough to throw out other things. But when a player who everyone is concerned with, a player who they deem as important now within the squad, and I think definitely in the team, people need to know. And I don't know why they're keeping it quiet in their way. I'm sure they'll say they're not, and it's their kind of way of doing things, but things normally come out somewhere, and nothing's been said at all. And it is a shame because I would like to see him next to Martinez. I think those two together would be really, really good.
Yeah.
But it hasn't had that opportunity. And, if those two were to get together and get to where I believe they would do, then you'd turn around and say, that's your centre of defence in a certain way sorted out. That make that something to maybe build from. And obviously with Heaven and Euro there as well, but it offers other dimensions as well. So he is that one. The Mason Mount situation, I just asked a question sometimes is how much does he really want to play? That's the bit. It's not as if it's been a long term one. This has been, is he, isn't he? Then yes, he is, and he's back. And then also you see the burst, and then he's out again. You don't know. No one's, never seen him get injured as such. It seems to happen just out of the blue because he walks off a pitch and then all of a sudden he disappears. And, where is the drive? I ask sometimes for people to play football when the rewards are so good anyway without having to step on the pitch.
Yeah. No, yeah, fair. Morning, Mark says, Mark O'Connor there. If you don't know who Mark O'Connor is, then I don't know if you're a United fan, to be honest. He's down in Australia running everything. I think he stood on immigration in case any United players pass. It grabs hold of everyone, and in Singapore as well. He's everywhere, isn't he, Mark? Paul spent last summer with him, right? Is that right? Was it last
Yeah,
summer?
I don't want to talk about it. He got on my nerves.
Yeah. Mark, he says massive game against Everton. Fancies winning. 7 a.m. kickoff Tuesday morning. Everywhere around the world, it's mad how like the hours they get up. And it's actually that's a good time for Australia, but they get up at like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's mad. Mark says Carrick for the job for the end of the season. Yeah, you know what? It's a tough one. This is a really interesting game, the Everton game tonight. So it's almost 3 months without a home win. Let's talk before we talk about Everton. I want to talk about David Moyes. If you talk about I don't know how much we've talked about Moyes. In fairness, because when we started our podcast together, Ollie had just taken over, so we haven't really had much time to talk about a manager per se, like from that era before. I mean, we did talk about him. I mean, we never sat for an hour and talked about Louis van Gaal on the podcast, for example. But David Moyes, is had it's a weird path back to Everton. He had the time at West Ham twice. He was there. Bit of a grass is greener situation for him at West Ham, where they thought, we'll get rid of him, and he went back and obviously had great success again. And then it went. I don't know if there's a thing like with Moyes when he left Everton the first time, it was like he just stayed there a little bit too long. And I'm not saying like he outstays his welcome. I just think maybe there's a peak point with David Moyes where there's a cycle in there. I don't know. We saw him at United. He never really got a fair shake. But then again, some people say 8 or 9 months was too long. I'm probably there. I think we saw that it wasn't going to work. I don't know how much more time we needed to invest in him. But he's come out, afterwards, and he spoke a lot about, well, we were in for Fabregas, we were in for Tony Cruz, we were in for Gareth Bale, we were in for all these players that we never signed in the end, ultimately. And Luke Shaw, he said, that all those kind of deals were in place. What do you make of Moyes' time at United? Do you think that it's one of those where you feel like he's got a fair argument to say he needed more time, or do you think that we'd seen enough there that we knew that it wasn't going to work out?
I just think he did things too quick. I think he tried to go along the same lines. I think it was it Graham Souness when he went in at Liverpool, and he
Oh
tried
yeah,
to he tried to change everything, didn't he? From when he was he got rid of the boot room. He took them away because they used to get changed at Anfield and then jump on a bus to go to the training ground. He changed everything completely, and I think that's what he tried to do. There was a stories about showing Vidic and Ferdinand videos of his centre halves at Everton and
yeah,
how they did things. You hear all these stories going, and managers coming. Graham Taylor did it with England. Um,
yeah,
he took away a lot of things during my time when he came in and changed a lot of things around very quickly. I mean, he used Peter Shelton. He got him in there as his goalkeeping coach, and I think everyone just says he just wanted to listen and talk to him about what was happening. And all of a sudden, I'll take that back. I'll take that back. And in the end, we were virtually controlled to the fact of you had a car picking you up to take you directly to the hotel, and then everything was where before we drove to the hotel and we done our bits. Some would go off on our free times and go home, or the ones who lived like I was living in Berkshire then, so I could drive back from the hotel. So he changed everything, and I think it affected the dynamics in the sense of people in their heads. So David Moyes done that, and I think he crossed a few human beings. We don't like change. When things are reasonably okay, a team that's just won the Premier League, why do you want to make massive changes? And because everybody wants to do it their own way, there isn't many who are willing to accept what's in place and just to try and tweak it for the better and get on with it. I mean, he did it last season, didn't he? Slot, he took
yeah,
on a team which wasn't his team, and he just got on with it. That's what he done. He didn't have to really try and improve it because it was decent enough, and all he done was got the plaudits that went with it. And did it bother him that much? about everyone saying it's Klopp team. Well, I'll tell you what, no one really talks about that. Never really heard that question asked or anything about it. So David Moyes didn't want that. He wanted to do his own way. Didn't keep a member of staff. I felt that he should have at least tried to keep Mickey Phelan now.
Yeah.
Just someone to work with the players, who knew the players, someone who was a good player for Manchester United, knew it all the way through, and keep him on. It doesn't have to have him as his assistant. He had his
Yeah.
own people, but he just made too many changes, and players then were in that kind of position. Then when really they were looking, and especially those players there, were some serial winners there. They were looking there, and maybe the respect wasn't really coming.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that's my take on it, really, Wayne, and that side of it
No.
with David Moyes. I'd love to speak to him, and have spoken to him on a few occasions when he was up the road at West Ham. Talked a few times, but I just knowing just how he can suddenly switch on and switch off. I was never brave enough to even go anywhere near that. But I just talked generally about it, but I weren't going to go there.
No, he has been quite open talking about what happened at United. I guess there are some things that he wouldn't ever talk about. I don't know if that's in respect to the fact he's still a manager, and there's some areas you don't go. But I always felt with him, he was damned if you did and damned if you didn't. See, he had to go in and do something. I'm with you. I thought Phelan, Rennie Mullenstein. But I think Rennie, when he had the conversation with Rennie, it was more like he wanted to do the things that Rennie was doing in terms of the match plans in training and everything. So he was saying there was no room for him. He could stay around if he wanted. But those two coaches, they were there for the autonomy of it. They just had the running of everything. I mean, Ferguson was controlling in the way that he did, but they were running the day to day things at Carrington, and you just wonder, like you said, if they'd have just been a little bit more staggered with the transition, sort of respected a lot more of what they inherited. Because I think at the time they were talking about United as a finished squad. They were like saying, even though we won the league by a lot, and there was need to replace a lot of those players because of the age. But I think a lot got said about the decline of them. I mean, Giggs barely got used. Ferdinand and Carrick got run into the ground in the early part of the season. They were like, they were. I remember they were on strict kind of game management plans in order to make sure that they weren't running to the ground because they were big lads. And Carrick Ferguson was doing that, but at the start of the season, he was just like, those two are going to play every single week. And that's not what they were used to doing. It's just a strange one, really. I felt that his time to leave Everton might have been 2 years earlier than what he did, like maybe 2011. I think if Wenger had stepped down, Arsenal might have seemed like a good step for him at that time. Even Spurs might have taken a chance on him. But he's back at Everton, and there has at times been a little bit of something in there. Like at the end of last season, there was a little bit something reminiscent, but it's a lot to ask someone to do the same things that they were doing 20 years ago and get the same kind of results. I mean, they're never going to challenge for Champions League. And it's crazy to think like Everton were in this situation where they had a guy come in with loads of money. He brought in Carlo Ancelotti. They moved stadium. They've done all these kind of things, and they've been impacted by the PSR regulations and everything like that. But they've always been where, if you look at two clubs who have been where they've been since the Premier League started, if you think now in 2026 as opposed to 1992, Everton and Spurs seem to have been stuck in that same cycle for a quarter of a century, which is crazy to think about. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, I think that maybe if the last 20 years hadn't happened where Chelsea and City have been bankrolled the way that they had, then maybe there was room for an Everton or the Spurs to break it once they got into the Champions League, that they could have built on that. But they've just been compressed, they've been pushed down, and they've not been able to do anything. And I look at Everton now and I see, like, I'm looking at the stats just before I to research for this morning, and it's almost 3 months without a home win. Early December against Forest. Since then, they've lost 1-0 at home to Everton, 4-2 at home to Brentford. They drew 1-1 with Wolves and then with Leeds, and then last time out they lost 2-1 against Bournemouth. They've even had a home defeat to Sunderland in the cup there. It's a strange time because now you're looking at them and thinking, oh, they're not going to get relegated, but they're in that sort of plodding along period where you almost wondering if Moyes is gatekeeping for the next manager again. It's such a strange position because so many times it's felt with Everton that they're there to take the next step, but you've almost even more than Everton fans being resigned to the fact that it's not going to happen. It's such a strange one, and like to see Moyes back in there when we've seen him do this same thing 20 years ago. It's such a strange dynamic to see. To see it again, really. What do you make of what happened? What's happened with Everton this season?
Yeah, they seem to. I mean, what you're saying now. I mean, at one point they were sick. They seemed like they were going to be unbeatable in the new stadium. It
Yeah,
went that way every time every time the team went there. You went, oh, that's a home win. You knew they had to fight for their lives. And David Moyes is held in incredibly high regard at West Ham. On those two occasions, what he done was incredible. He just went in there, and in a way, he is a bit of a firefighter. He had to quell a few. He had players there who were not in the right place, and he sorted them out. Arnautovic was one of them. Arnautovic was a hell of a player, but he's a problem, and no one could deal with him. David Moyes virtually just made him his centre forward, made him his captain, and straight away he became a focal point of that side in that first spell. And then when they decided to get rid of him and go for the ex-Manchester City manager Pellegrini,
yeah,
they got again madness again. And what do? They bring him back again, and he goes and gets them a European trophy. And then they decide after winning European trophy, he's not what they want, you know.
yeah,
And you're hearing the old things, the grass is greener and all those kind of things. And West Ham maybe made a massive mistake in certain ways, but the way the club is, you're not really sure. But he goes to Everton, he makes a difference there as he does, takes them into the new ground. Great start. The place becomes a fortress, as the saying goes. And now, at the moment in time, it just seems like it's not a fortress anymore. It's lost
yeah,
that way. But this is a game when it can all start again. As you know, Wayne, Everton lift their game. There's a team which was across a park, but not anymore. Who's big home game from, and Manchester United. So the
yeah,
whole complexion changes of everything. Those fans will not care about what's happened in the previous home games if they go and get a result this evening. That's all disappeared. Everything will just disappear, and it's just about that. So those players, and hopefully Michael Carrick will get those players to understand that they're going into a war zone in this game, as best you can in today's football. It's a no contact war zone.
Well, certainly you didn't get away with that at Goodison because there's no room for no contact. So
Yeah.
you're on top of each other. Um, it's a strange one to know how he's going to line up. Would he go with the same team, including Dallow and Maguire in there? I mean, I've got to say this, by the way, Paul. There was a fan engagement event at Old Trafford last week, and it was meant to be Dogu, Xerxes, and then Bumo at Old Trafford, and they're in the Megastore and they're meeting supporters, right? So we'd gone in on Monday or Tuesday, and one of the staff told us to go in. On Thursday, they said, like these players are going to come in if you want to meet them. So I thought, that'd be nice to take Ruby along and meet some players. And on the day, on the morning, we saw my nephew. My nephew came over from Sheffield. And we went in to just as we were like leaving that morning. They put out a message saying, actually, in fact, I think we'd arrived at the ground, and they put out a thing saying it's these things are subject to change, and Dogu's not going to be there. It's Dallo, and it's fine. You know what? The organisation wasn't great, but the players were great with Ruby. They had a picture, it was a really nice picture. And what was really funny is that on one of the pictures, Dallo was going for a high five with Ruby.
No. He,
Uh,
even though he can't help himself outside of 90 minutes, he still can't help himself, can he?
no, what I was going to say is maybe that's just who he is as a person. So maybe we need to sort of cut him a little bit of slack. If he just and I'm being a little bit biased there because they were dead nice with her. But yeah, it was funny. I think I didn't really pick up on it, but people were, because those pictures were put on socials by the club, and everyone's saying, "Oh, Dallo even high fiving in the thing." But yeah, do you reckon? I mean, it feels like the kind of challenge that Everton will put, it seems like an obvious one for Dallo and Maguire to be playing in. I can't see him. I don't know. Is there any evidence from the West Ham game that he makes changes from what we saw down there? I mean, that we weren't great, like you said. I just don't know if there's enough evidence that he makes the changes that we would have expected to see by now. And what I mean by that is, we'd all expected to see, let's say, Euro playing in defence alongside Martinez and Mazraoui on the right hand side since he came back from the AFCON, but they've just not been there yet.
I think that's the area where he can make changes, and it's not going to be that noticeable. If you go
Yeah,
and make changes with the midfield, I think that's going to be noticeable because
yeah,
there's no depth, no depth, absolutely nothing there at all. If you look at what you're looking up front, the only thing he can do really maybe is start with Shesko. And then you've got to
yeah,
think, is it Cunha who's going to step away? You can maybe look at that. Defensively, there's a little bit more flexibility. I think you can give Mazraoui a run at right back.
yeah,
If you want, put him there. And I think maybe you can put a Euro or Heaven next to a Martinez. Just for the fact of Martinez, just by the way he is as a person, he would lead that person next to him. And especially being someone like a Heaven, I think it would be an incredible learning experience to play next to someone like him, someone who plays as a centre half, as a footballer, like a 1980, 1990 footballer,
yeah,
in that manner, that kind of, I'm going to say, controlled aggression. I hope that doesn't come back and bite me. But he has
yeah,
got that bit. He has definitely got that control about him. Maybe because he's playing more regular now. Maybe because he's definitely more comfortable in the middle than doing a job at left back.
yeah,
So I mean, he could even go and play in midfield, to be honest. But I think he's definitely better coming onto the game. And when he steps in, he can, his passing from deep positions is really, really good. So that's the only change that I think that I see that can be made, but isn't going to have a massive impact on the team.
yeah. And I would say this as well, and this is a compliment to everyone and the way that they've played so far, that it is more about United changing for the sake of their betterment rather than addressing the opposition, right? I mean, they're not looking at anything that Everton are going to be doing. Grealish is out. We know Grealish is missing. And Jack O'Brien, it's not really that he's suspended, but he's not so big an absentee that you would say, oh, well, look, that swings it in United's favour for sure. There's not a lot of threat there. Famous last words, of course, but there's not a lot of threat through Everton that you think United have to be worried about that they need to set up in a certain way. Like, you don't have to put Maguire in because you're worried about crosses, for example. There's no, I mean, Everton will cross the ball. That's what David Moyes teams do. I mean, there's no evident threat in there to say, I mean, the game might change. You might need to bring him on for that. But from the outset, you should be looking at, United's own strengths and hoping that Euro or another player like Evan could bring something to that and give a chance to show themselves in a game like they saw or a Palace at the weekend, which we'll talk about in a second. I mean, in the games that in the past at Everton at Goodison, you would think about the tight ground, maybe the crosses that you might want to start with the Maguire, but this is potentially an opportunity to play a little bit more open than what you normally would go in there.
Yeah, there is. But I mean, when you talk about crossing their way, it isn't a case of they just kind of get in wide areas and go to like a basketball mode and bring out a 3-pointer, just keep throwing things into the mix all the time. It is kind of getting in decent wide areas and putting early crosses in. Does Harry Maguire help in that scenario? Not really. Not
Mm.
if you just want someone team that sit deep and just for them to keep knocking balls in, he can do that all day long. You
Yeah,
can go and find players in the Championship first and second division to do that job. But you can't be sitting deep, and this is just getting the ball out wide and delivering early crosses in. You don't have to be 6 foot plus to win those kind of balls. It's about being in the right areas at the right time. That's where it comes from. and if you are a little bit caught out, then there's more of a chance of a problem. So is it necessary for a Harry Maguire to play because of the fact of his heading ability in a game like this? No, it isn't. It's about having the right players who are patient and willing to play under serious pressure with a big noise behind in a team that's had a poor time at home, not finishing the season great, a team that are going to lift themselves because the fans will demand it, and players who can play in a controlled way that when they get the ball, they take the sting out of the game. That's what you're looking for. You know, you don't want to go end to end in this game as make it into a boxing match or anything like that, because that's the kind of games that Everton love and their fans love it. And all you're doing is raising the fans the best way when you go there, regardless of Everton's position or where they are.
Yeah.
You look at it differently, a different animal. You quell them. That's what you do when you get the ball. You quell them. You don't start throwing wood in the fire.
Yeah, it's strange. We talk about this. I mean, Everton in particular. Yeah, we talk about certain clubs that you go to or certain grounds, and I mean, it is speaking with the perspective of it being United that are going there, which is interesting. Like, you know, if we were a Forest podcast, you're not talking about, oh, Everton will do this or the atmosphere will be like this. You'd be taking Everton on the merits of the team. I mean, I know that the last win at home was against Forest, bad example there, but the point being there that because it's United, you talk about it a little bit differently. I wonder how much. I mean, this is also a different kind of test for United to be playing after the weekend results. I mean, Liverpool won in dramatic circumstances yesterday. You know, they first of all having the goal disallowed and then winning it properly late on. That really keeps the pressure on. So this is a different kind of challenge for United as well. I mean, we've said that every single week with Carrick. United have generally answered, even if they didn't answer with 3 points against West Ham, they still answered against a resurgent West Ham team, and they got a good result there. I mean, it's a different kind of challenge for Carrick to say, all right. I mean, you can't answer every single one and win every single one, but it is nice to see that it's a different kind of hurdle for him to get over.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I look at it. I mean, that's the thing what you just mentioned there is that it is a different kind of game to most teams. When you look at Manchester United, when they go to certain grounds, there's a different to them. The way they have to react to most teams, they have to react in a different way because the levels of the games are completely different. So Michael's going to have to, get that one sorted. I'm sure he's got in his mind how he wants to address the game, and he knows what it means for himself as well because he's in it for himself. He wants to be manager of Manchester United. He hasn't said that he wants it in certain ways. He hasn't come right out and said that. But if it's not in his head that he wants it, then there's something wrong with him. He's not showing enough ambition. If he doesn't want that job, he'd be foolish not to be thinking that way. And he knows every time he goes out, he has 90 minutes, and he gets a result. He knows that takes him a little bit closer to making the thinking harder for the next people. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not the result that matters as well. The results are great. It's about the performance as well. There's no point just nicking the game and getting those kind of, just having to scrape a result. He's got to get a performance out of the team. He's got to be looking to improve his team from what they were before.
Yeah, the other thing with Carrick as well is that when you're talking about, I've got no doubt that he's got the ambition to take over. But every single week, it's like one of the prime candidates is out of the running, and one of those is Oliver Glasner. He was tipped. We were talking about him when Amorim was sacked, and we were talking about him in the lens of, well, he plays the same kind of system, and you've been very high on Glasner. You've talked a lot about how effective he is with that system as opposed to Amorim. He was getting the best out of the Palace players in that kind of system, the formation that he was doing, as opposed to Amorim getting the worst out of the collective. And it's been so surprising. I mean, not in terms of, after the Lord Mayor's parade, you would expect a little bit of a flatness, but maybe not this flat. They won the FA Cup and thoroughly deserved to do so. They won the Community Shield and deserved to do that as well, even albeit on penalties. And you think, all right, well they lost Eze. They were always going to lose Gay in either January or the summer. So two key players go in there, but Glasner made no. First of all, he made no secret of his frustration with that and how he wasn't getting backed, and then he made no secret of the fact he's going to leave at the end of the season. I've never made any indication that he was going to sign a new contract there. But I mean, at one point, like I said, we're talking about him for the United job only because of, well, two reasons. Because he was doing so well at Palace, but secondly, because of the fact that he played this three-man defence. And everyone was thinking, well, if Ratcliffe and Wilcox and Broad have settled on a three-man defence, he's the obvious person who's overachieving out there. But now we're talking about, would he get sacked from Palace because they're doing so poorly? And I mean, for me, it seems like another life looking at him. But I mean, for them, it must seem like that as well. It's very, I don't know. I mean, they've had a decent away record in the league still. I mean, they had a bad run over winter in sort of December and January, but I mean, they've had good away with, I think there was 6 or 7 away games this season, which is not bad for a club of Palace's stature, especially well, it'd be the 1st of March by then, but yeah, strange old time. And you see a lot of Palace. So you were talking about it earlier about the changing atmosphere there, but about Glasgow in particular, how surprised are you by what's going on with him?
It's a strange one really, because the first I kind of really heard of him was when Eintracht Frankfurt, when West Ham drew Eintracht Frankfurt in the Europa League, and the game over there, and then they come to London Stadium, and you saw a very, very good team, really, really good team, and the way they played, they were very effective in what they done. And then when he goes to Palace, and you see, and after watching Palace for so many seasons under Roy Hodgson, but still loving going to Selhurst Park, even then under Roy, the atmosphere, and when things were going their way, the way their fans took it, and when things weren't going well, the way their fans were still behind the team. And that was with a Roy Hodgson negative team. It wasn't a positive team because he didn't feel he had enough there. They relied so much on Zaha. Everything was through him. And if it wasn't going through him, everything was defend, defend, defend. He comes in, those same players, he absolutely swings them around, sets on a system. Those players leap on it. And I still say they leapt on it because it suited them. It made them feel important, as well as players that they wanted. And the players he had at that given time, the ones that have been sold were the ones who made the whole thing. They put the whole thing together. You had the ones at the back doing the dirty work, the blue collar brigade, and then you had the white collars up the top end who were getting all the glory, the adulation. But the ones at the back didn't care because they was involved in something meaningful. Yeah. And that's what he done. He gave it a good feel factor, and you could feel it down there. So what's happening now is a team that has just come down to earth so quick that they don't know how to react. Some are saying we should be pleased and blessed that we had that and get on with it. And there's a lot of them who are saying, well, he's taking it to heart about him saying he's going. Where Crystal Palace, it happened so quick for them, and they'll live off it for years. And it's fantastic for the club to go and do what they've done. They've just been really, in theory, a selling club. They've had so many good players who have gone through and moved on to good things. And I just think now they've got to that point where they can't match his ambition. He doesn't want to be selling off these players that he is improving. I mean, he's the one who made Eze a viable product. Because people kept looking at him under Roy. And I said this from when I first saw Eze when he was at QPR. He doesn't turn up for big games. And every time when I've done commentary, I look for the big games that Palace played. And I saw him at Rangers for quite a few times and always saw him. And I always had my doubts about those little bits. Gets that move to Crystal Palace, see him play, and that typical, those runs, he should have been doing the Winter Olympics, really, shouldn't he? The way he moves with the boys, absolutely incredible. But every time it come to the bigger games at Selhurst Park, or even away from home, but I'm talking more Selhurst because that's where I saw him live more often. He never turned up in the games when they needed him against Liverpool, when the games were a little bit on edge. As Palace did in big games, they took teams to task and they really had to go. But he done that, Glasser. He done that. He changed him. Elise, you know,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
incredible what he done. Some of the things, and look at Elise now. You know, when I was shouting Elise for ages about with United, it just made sense. He was everything that a Manchester United fan would want to watch, especially the ones who have seen the United teams in the 90s and the 2000s, the early 2000s. They would have gone, he's a Manchester United player. Put him out wide. He'll step inside, go outside. He'll do it all for you. And he just what he done, and it's tough for him. You know, it's like they're virtually like they want. You know, the fans want him there in their life, but there's some of them who just want to divorce him straight away so they can forget about him and just remember the two things they won, which they never thought they were going to get. You
yeah.
know, it's going to be a terrible split at the end of the season if it
Yeah,
lasts that long.
yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking there, and I do think my memory goes back to the Palace days of the 1990 World Cup, FA Cup final, and then they were relegated 5 years after that. They just sort of lost their way under Coppell, and then Alan Smith came in for a bit, and you just thought they. I don't want to say ideas above the station, but where do you go? I always think like there was an example I've used in the past. It's a bad example for this comparison, but you'll know what I mean. When Hull City came up and they had Phil Brown, and he, he's Marmite, but a lot of people didn't like him. But Hull stayed up, and then they sacked Phil Brown, and I was like, well, what were you wanting from Hull City? Do you know what I mean? Surely survival is what you wanted. You couldn't have wanted more than that. And then they went down, obviously, after Phil Brown, and this is as good as it was going to get for Palace in this short term. They weren't really going to build much further. They might have got into Europe on a semi-regular basis, which I don't think that'd be a good return for Palace. Like getting in Europe like 3 or 4 years in a row or something like that. Maybe that's what Glasner wanted that he's not going to get. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one regarding that away record that they've got. Like I said, you normally see them at Selhurst Park, but they were travelling well at the start of the season. It seemed like they had that momentum going, but then when things turned and they went south, they've not really been able to sort of pull it back a little bit. Although I think they won last time out away from home. Do you see that they're going to be a problem for United? I mean, they've got a really good record at Old Trafford, haven't they? In the last 5 years or so.
They have, and it's something that needs to be flipped. To be perfectly honest, it needs to be changed. In my opinion, there's more belief in me now than what has been a while that they will beat Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, just the way Palace are defensively, they've I mean, Lacroix's out injured. I mean, they're the quartet really. I mean, they had Shalabar, who they got on loan. So he kind of started. So it was Shalabar, Lacroix, and then Gahey. And then Shalabar then went back to Chelsea. Chelsea took him back early. And then Chris, I can't remember. When I'm commentary, I keep saying Cliff for Richards, the centre half, the American boy. I keep going Cliff Richards. And like, oh, that's the last thing he's going to want if his parents would tell him what about Cliff Richards, and they go, "Don't ever call my son Cliff again." But he's playing, and those three, Chris Richards, Lacroix, and Gahey was a fantastic three.
Yeah.
Pace, strength, desire to win balls, a desire to defend well, sense danger, and when they wanted to play football, they virtually just started with Gahey. He was the one who was virtually only allowed to have more than 2 touches.
Yeah.
The other two knew their strengths, knew their limitations. And then you had the wing backs, Tyrick Mitchell, who doesn't get any credit at all, a very, very good left wing back, a very, very good left back. And Muniz on the right side, for me, the best right-sided defender in the league.
Yeah.
Muniz, he can play right back and he'll still be going past the winger, and then he'll be going back the other way to get his tackling. He absolutely hates anything happening on each side of the field that might lead to danger. He absolutely, and I love that because there isn't anyone about. He's the only person I know who gets close to people to try and stop a cross.
Yeah.
He can't help himself. He's an absolute workaholic. Best in the league, in my opinion, they've got there. But they've got centre halves now. Um, Chaddy Reinl, I think his name is. Riyadh. Chaddy Riyadh plays on the left hand side, and the lad on the right hand side, um, Canval as well. They're not very good. They're
Yeah.
not very good at all. I don't know if Lacroix's back. Richards took a horrible whack to the head. He looked a bit. It was a bit of a Terry Butcher. That's the funny thing. I said that as well. I said I think he needs a Terry Butcher. And all of a sudden I realised he just had his head blooming bashed. The last thing he wants is a butcher. But they wrapped him up. It was the highest afro I've ever seen in my life. It was just up there. It was massive. He had like a block of flats on his head. But he took that, so I don't know how he will be around that. But he'll definitely be a little bit sore still by the time he gets round to that game. But they're not strong as a back. They're not. They've lost at this moment. If I'm going by yesterday's game, they've lost about 70% of their back three. You know, I mean, the goalkeeper, I would say with Dean Henderson, he still likes himself.
Yep.
He's another one. Him and Dallo could be great if it comes to high fives. Those two together would be incredible. It'd be amazing, those two. Absolutely amazing. So I can only look at Manchester United winning that game. And I've never, in the last few seasons, I would never say it outright like that about Crystal Palace because I have a lot of respect for Palace and the players and the way they play.
Yeah. Although going by confidence, we'll probably win tonight and draw on Sunday. I don't know. We'll see. It will be interesting challenges for Carrick at the moment because of the fact that we are playing after everyone else, and these games. Everton got such a poor record at home at the moment. Palace poor on the road. That these are games now United are expected to win, and these are the ones where United have struggled. Not just under Amorim. This has been a post-Ferguson problem. Like under Moyes, going back to Moyes when we played Newcastle at home and we played Everton at home and we lost. I think we lost both of them in a week, or we drew with Newcastle. He said something like, "We'll try and make it difficult for Newcastle." The biggest problem with Moyes is that he wasn't a confident speaker in the role, and the press tore him to bits over it. But he's a good dogmatic manager for Everton, and like you said earlier, this is the kind of challenge that they get up for. This is the kind of they've got United tonight, they've got Everton in a few, Liverpool in a few weeks. Those are the results that they'll be looking out for this season. It doesn't matter if they win or lose on a weekly basis at home. Obviously they would have liked it to have been a fortress where they were never beaten, but once that goes, it's then how would you do against United and Liverpool in your first season? Those first results at the stadium and under the lights. I've not witnessed the atmosphere yet, I must say that, so we'll see. It might be something that sets it off like a firework. We never know. Let's hope that United don't give them the opportunity to do that, and let's hope that Palace don't get another win at Old Trafford. I think they must have won at least twice in the last 3 or 4 visits to Old Trafford. And I know this because my sister-in-law's boyfriend's a mad Palace fan. He's been everywhere with them. He went to Wembley and everything like that. So he's been buzzing for the last year, and he's always been keen to rub my nose in it when Palace have won at Old Trafford. That's happened too many times, lads. So if you could save my weekends, that'd be very gratefully received. That's it for this week, guys. We'll be back next week to talk about those games, and then probably take another year off by the fixture list. Have a great one, and we'll be back then. So yeah, take care.